Well, today's going to be a fun discussion. We're here with Michael Anthony. He's a liberty activist. He's a person who has been getting the conversation started around wellness, nutrition, particularly those who are interested in keto and carnivore. Michael Anthony is our guest. How are you, sir?
I'm doing well, David. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's great having you on. And, I've seen your work over the years and I always thought you had an interesting angle on things and a very uh, interesting way of connecting dots in a way that's very refreshing. And you don't get it all into hyper emotionalism or any of that kind of thing. So you're based out of in the New York City area, right?
Thanks. Yeah, I'm in New York City. I grew up in New York City. I was born here, born in Brooklyn, and raised between Brooklyn and Queens. Grew up going to the city for school and college. And yeah, I'm just an all-around New Yorker.
What's the most exciting thing about being a New Yorker in 2022?
I think the fight for liberty right now, because I mean, as difficult as it can be, it's also exciting and it's a privilege to be around at this time to uphold the founding principles of the United States and of liberty itself I mean, under this very shadow of the Statue of Liberty, um, to try to ensure a future for humanity, the way I see it.
What liberties are the most important to you? I mean, is there a focus that you have when you talk about liberty? People mean different things by that.
That's true. Um, Ultimately, well, as an anarcho-capitalist in ANCAP, I personally feel that the less government, the better in general, but specifically right now, the especially in places like New York City, you have this push to force everybody to uh, comply with mandates that violate their bodily autonomy and their own deepest principles. So that's what I focus on right now is the fight against especially the vaccine mandates. But I think that that's part of a larger structure that's being built around us and really beginning to take its deepest roots into New York City, California, places like that. And yeah, that's again my focus is mostly bodily autonomy at this point, but it's part of a bigger picture, much bigger picture.
And you have a podcast called The Meat of It. What do you talk about on that podcast?
Oh, the meat of it. Yeah. Well, the meat of it, along with the rest of my content, has been increasingly about this. I see as inextricably linked the freedom to do, say, eat what you want to eat. Like I'm a carnivore, so uh, I see this push toward plant-based eating, and and this how it connects to a globalist agenda to try to control everything about our lives. And I I just again, like you were saying, I try to connect the dots, and so the meat of it began really, and just like a lot of my online content began as more strictly having to do with the carnivore diet, ketogenic diets, and physical health, and how that also helps our mental health and other things. But I have branched out more into the liberty philosophy. I've always been into these things, but I've been trying to just show how they're all connected because everything is connected in the entire universe, and that includes these more that's on the macro scale and the micro scale.
How long have you been a carnivore?
About 5 years now, going on 5 years.
How do you feel? Do you feel better and better every year, or does it plateau and you just feel about the same, or how does it go?
I mean, I have natural ups and downs, mostly when I kind of deviate from what I know is optimal. But I feel better and better. Yes, every year I feel and look healthier. I recently posted a before and after, reflecting on my almost 5 years. It was on my birthday, which was recently, and I can't believe that I used to look and feel the way that I did. I look younger than I did 10 years ago, and feel younger than I did 10 years ago, just by eating fatty red meat. I switched from a standard American diet, eating all the sugars, the breads, the seed oils or vegetable oils, and all that stuff. And I when I changed my diet to just fatty red meat and other meats, animal products, but focusing on fatty red meat, I lost 70 pounds within like 7 months at a nice, steady, healthy rate. And I started to, my
Did you go to the
clinical,
gym too, or was that just all sedentary?
it was mostly sedentary, believe it or not. I mean, people say you should exercise to get healthy, but I say that, and I experienced that your energy increases as you improve your physical health. So you naturally become more active. So I've always loved walking and stuff like that, and exercise, sporadically, but I got fit mostly by just changing my diet. And that was, and people don't really believe that, but your a keto diet is basically just eating in a way that naturally encourages your body to burn fat. And really, the anytime you lose fat, or any excess weight, it is because your body is eating what you have on you. It's a natural thing. We are built to hold on to energy for later on, but now we have such an abundance of food, and we have all these corporations that really program us for food addiction, that we end up just overdoing it and storing too much. And then, or we have other issues that, even if it's not weight, it'll affect our hormones, our again, our mental health, our just all different aspects of us, of our bodies and our minds and our lives, that we don't really connect to food. But it all begins with, I think, food and really lifestyle, but food is at the heart of that.
Was there a particular health issue you were trying to solve when you started the carnivore journey?
I kind of stumbled into it because I was going through a really tough time. Honestly, my little cat had just died. I had him for 13 years, and he was the first pet that I raised for, well, his family, more than a pet, but the first cat or a dog or any animal in my life that I raised from a baby. So it was just really heartbreaking to lose him. And I just stopped eating. In the past, I'd always tried to bury my sorrows in lots of frozen pizzas and boxes of cereal and all this kind of stuff that I didn't know was killing me. And I I didn't feel like eating that time. I was so depressed that I just didn't eat, and eventually started to crave fatty foods, started eating a little bit of meat here and there, some cheese, whatever, and then looked up on Google, is all eating, this is back when Google actually gave you more accurate results. They said, I looked up, will eating all this fat kill me? And discovered a ketogenic diet, and then quickly went down the rabbit hole into carnivore, because I thought it was the ultimate keto diet as soon as I learned what it was. Then did about like a year or more of research to really convince myself as I did it, just to make sure that I wasn't actually killing myself. I wasn't convinced right away. And
Do you
sure
follow
enough,
more of the Paul Saladino route or the Tom or Sean Baker route, or
Sean
Sean Baker
Baker.
eats mostly muscle meat and Saladino eats um, lots of organ meats. Now, of course, he's added honey and fruits into his mixture, so he's gone a little bit different direction.
Yeah, I'm more of a Dr. Baker guy. And he's actually interviewed me for his podcast. And yeah, I work with Rivero here and there. And I think that it takes different, just like with anything, you need different viewpoints. And I disagree with Saladino on many things. I think sugar is sugar, and that we should try to moderate it regardless. But there are a lot of factors that go into that. So, but definitely but I think that eating animal organs is a very important source of nutrition for many people. And I do take a supplement from mostly Optimal Carnivore grass-fed beef capsules, which have these freeze-dried uh, freeze-dried liver or other organs that you don't even have to taste, because I don't really like the taste that much either. That's what makes people kind of avoid the organs, but they're not that awful, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. Do you eat eggs and chicken and pork and fish and seafood and all that other stuff? Cheeses, dairy?
I love all of it. I eat all of it, but some of it I have to moderate. I seem to have, I think it's because of the damage I've done over the years, decades of eating poorly. I seem to kind of uh, get an inflammatory response from too many eggs and too much dairy. I do stick to pasture raised eggs
Mhm.
and high quality raw dairy, but even then, but I advocate very strongly for those because I think that they're a great option for most people.
So when you do carnivore, you're not eating anything. You're not like using coconut oil like
No,
that. Yeah.
no, I eat mostly, I'd say I try to have some beef every day, either steak or ground beef. And then
You eat
because
like a couple, do you try to aim for like 2 pounds of meat a day or a certain amount of calories a day, or how do you do that?
I don't measure anymore. I
Yeah.
started off measuring, but at this point I just kind of I eat more intuitively now, but it tends to be about a pound and a half to 2 pounds of meat or animal products per day,
Do
mostly
you,
muscle meat.
do you find it to be a conflict for your social interactions that, your particular way of eating?
Mostly if I'm out eating at a restaurant, of course, it can be tricky. I have to make special requests. I have to be that guy uh, saying, "Oh, do you use vegetable oils to fry your food? Do you, all these things?" But yeah, sometimes I try to relax a bit and enjoy. Not I still give away all my sides, but sometimes I don't ask too many questions and I just say, yeah, I'll have a steak, or yeah, I'll have a burger with no bun, that kind of thing. But it's not too complicated as long as we're not at a vegan restaurant.
Do you think that uh, to do carnivore in a healthy way, it costs a little bit more money than the average American food budget?
I don't really think so because I don't spend a lot of money on snacks and uh, different kinds of, like sugary beverages or anything like that. I do still drink coffee. Stopped it for a long time, but
You drink
I
what? Coffee?
coffee, yes, but without sugar, and I don't even put milk in it anymore since I'm avoiding too much dairy. But it's yeah, I tend to uh, I'm sorry. I feel like I'm going off the point.
Oh no. Do you sleep? How does your sleep? Does your sleep do better under carnivore?
My sleep has always been kind of tricky. I'm naturally not maybe not an insomniac, but a night owl. So if I try to live a more diurnal life, I end up nocturnal again anyway, burning the candle at both ends and then burning myself out. So yeah, mostly nocturnal. And I tend to just stay up into the night, whether I like to or not. Just getting inspired, stuff like that.
Researching. Do you have a lot of I guess if you're in the city, you probably got a lot of that blue light exposure and Wi-Fi all around you. Do you try to do anything to stop some of that EMF?
Yeah, the well, I have some shungite stone that I
What's that?
it's it's a it's a stone that is supposed to help to absorb a lot of those frequencies and maybe protect you from them. But I yeah, in general, I don't have a Faraday cage or anything. I maybe should manage it more, but yeah, I am surrounded by and probably bathed in these waves. But luckily, I'm in the suburbs most of the time, so that might help. But
I did carnivore for a long period of time. What I noticed is that you'd wake up, it felt like there was no grogginess. It was just like your lights came on and you were ready to go, like you were in the middle of your most energetic time of the day. I know
exactly,
you
it's
feel the
amazing.
same way. You don't have that groggy kind of like, oh man, I'm tired feeling, right? You have that just lights on kind of thing.
Yeah, it's way different.
Yeah.
I don't get that brain fog, that fuzziness as much as I used to, and never to that degree. So it's really fantastic. Sometimes I'm amazed at how I'm able to. I've always been able to say function on a very small amount of sleep if I had to, but now I wake up feeling sharp, ready to go, and I mean I might hit snooze every now and then too, but it's more of a choice. Before it was there are very physiological reasons that people feel the way they do, and the information out there, it's part of this. Again, there are so many different psyops being worked on us at all times, and uh, again, this attack on us through food, through lifestyle, telling us to stay out of the sun, telling us to put on sunscreen, telling us
Oh yeah.
to
Wear shoes and socks.
even that stuff. Yeah, I try to get a connection to the earth. I don't always go earthing with bare feet on the ground, but all these things are incredibly important. And I think that we're being deliberately divorced from our connection to nature and to the universe in so many different ways. Uh, Psychologically, philosophically, religiously, politically, all of these different elements are being used to make us weaker, easier to control, more domesticated humans.
Why would they want to make us weaker, or who's they anyways?
They, yes, well, Klaus Schwab and all that whole gang, that they're a pretty popular target for liberty loving people like myself. But it's not just Klaus Schwab and the World Economic Forum. It's I think all power structures across not just the world, but across time since the beginning of, I say this ties back in with Carnivore, that I believe that the worst elements of society really took root at the beginning of agriculture,
Mm-hmm.
when, of course, we started to grow and store grains and other foods that were, first of all, suboptimal or even harmful. Um, and then we weren't eating them in as great amounts as we didn't during the agricultural well, I don't know what you call it, but at the beginning of agriculture, we changed our diets. We started to build big cities, and just everything changed. There's so many layers to it. I don't want to get too lost in it, but definitely the quality of our food declined. The quality of our health declined. I mean, you read ancient texts, they'll mention uh, things like cancer, diabetes, and these existed in, like, say, ancient Greece and other ancient cultures. You look at ancient Egypt; they actually depicted themselves as being uh, slightly pudgy, and it was interesting that they had a little bit more on their bones because they were, I think, because they were eating more grains. And uh, of course they're a very they're revered as an early civilization, but there was a lot of tyranny. There was a lot of there were health issues. They were using uh, just like the ancient Greeks, these say things like cosmetics that contained lead, poisoning themselves. Just we think about Victorian times, they were doing similar things, using these toxic products. But really, it's ever since we started to uh, build what we call civilizations, which again are tied to the development of agriculture, which, by the way, also shrank the human brain physically. That we stopped getting the nutrition we did from eating more meat and less grain and other stuff like that, and our actual brains shrank. You can look at the archaeological record, the anthropological record, and see that. So there's so many layers to this, and it's all connected.
Yeah, I think increased consumption of omega-6 fats, particularly, have been associated with antisocial behavior in prisons and stuff. You know, where
Mm,
they increase the linoleic acid from vegetable oil, probably, and other meats that have been poisoned with vegetable oil. You know, poof of fat producing feeds to the animals, chicken fat, pork fat, stuff like that, that it
yes,
can increase antisocial behavior. Vegetable oils are linked to mental retardation, lower IQs for infants who are fed breast milk,
mhm.
excuse me,
Oh, not breast milk.
formula.
Yes,
And I'm not
formula.
saying your child's going to be mentally retarded if they have formula, but it literally lowers the IQ in some cases when they study it. Um, but you see all these terrible things that are associated with vegetable oils, diabetes, cancer. And you
Mhm.
said that we did have heart disease and stuff in Egypt. Well, not we, I wasn't there, um, but it does seem like it exploded a lot in the last 100 years with the introduction of these vegetable seed oils that you referenced earlier. Um,
Yes,
I mean,
things have
carbs
got.
and sugars are part of the problem too. But I mean, people, in the founding
Mhm.
fathers era, they were eating lots and lots of apple pie and butter, and they didn't have the rates of, obesity. That's why all the founders look pretty thin usually. So they were eating those robust carb based meals, and they were still relatively way better off than we were. There's a few factors maybe why, but I do think that is there's an interesting connection there with agriculture. I mean, you look at the story of Cain and Abel. Cain is growing crops, and Abel is a nomadic herder of animals. And Cain has a soy boy rage and murders
Mhm.
Abel, because he's
Yeah.
angry. He's probably nutritionally deficient as well.
Absolutely. He needed more B12.
And then he founds his first city after that act, which is kind of like the sacrificial act for the founding of the first primordial city recorded in that text. So
Yeah.
there's something there to this idea of violent sacrifice being connected to the founding of cities. And that's
Yes.
kind of one
And
of the theme of my program. Things Hidden is the idea of getting into the idea of the foundational stones of human civilization being ritual sacrifice. If you look at the immurements that were taking place underneath the cornerstone rituals, they would lay down their first stone for the beginning of a new building or a new bridge or a new anything, new temple, and they would do a human sacrifice and then place that person under the stone for the blessing and consecration of that new city or that new temple or that new building. And that happens in Japan, that happens in ancient everywhere you go. Mesopotamia, it's all over the place.
mhm.
Then you also have walled immurements where they would build a wall and they'd put a person in there, a damsel or a lady, and they would let the baby. This could be someone who was even breastfeeding at the time. There's terrible, sad stories of them letting the baby be breastfed through the opening in the wall as they're building brick by brick to enclose the mother, but they're
Mm.
still letting her breastfeed the baby through the openings until she's completely sealed in alive. I mean, this was the common way of doing blessings for the consecration of a new government project all over the world. So, uh, thank
Wow.
God we've come a long way from that in some ways, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. There's a lot in there I didn't even really know about.
Yeah.
So but absolutely, to this day, you see that there's an element of sacrifice that I don't know how religious or esoteric or occult it might be. People have their varying opinions on that, and the truth is probably a little mixed, I think. But you see that even now, people are being told that even if what we need to do to move forward as a society might hurt you, destroy you, your family, your loved ones, even they just say that it's they don't exactly they again. I'd say these are governments and other institutions that are trying to steer us in certain directions will say acknowledge say in the case of the vaccine. um, I don't know how we can speak openly about that. I would hope so. The idea that everybody has to be forced to take an injection in order to participate in society even though one of the potential risks of that injection is death, injury or death, but everyone has to take it for everyone's good. That's a sacrifice, and that's, however you want to put it. And I think there are people who would actually now acknowledge that and still support it, and that's very concerning because they don't value their own lives or liberty enough to resist it, and that puts us all in the crossfire, I think.
Yeah, the idea of and even people who have taken certain products and then their kids take it and they get injured and they say, well, this is the price to pay for science. So
Yes.
it's like even the injury becomes a feature, not a bug, as if it's like, well, it's proving that I'm willing to sacrifice it all, including injury to myself or to a loved one, in the name of saving the world and in the name of scientific development, because these are new products. So there's two things there. There's the march towards scientific innovation, which is a new product. Let's all take it and force everybody to take it. And if a few of us have problems with it, it's okay. That's the price to pay for the glory of a new innovation. And then number two, there's the science of, trying to save lives in a medical sense of, well, I'm doing this because I have to save my neighbor or I have to save the person down the road from disease. And so the high priests have said that we all must do this ritual. And if we
Mm-hmm.
all do this ritual, the plague will subside, right? And then people who don't participate in that ritual violate the unity, the transcendent oneness that is an attempt to be achieved in this ritual.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like pouring cold water, or it's like pouring cold water while you're playing a video game or something. You're deep in the video game, someone pours a cup of ice cold water on your head while you're playing the game. It's gonna snap you out of it if you
Mm-hmm.
see other people are not doing it with you, of the ritual. Same thing goes for like another metaphor would be turning on the light during a movie, right? You see an action movie, you're engrossed, you've suspended your disbelief, so you feel like you're in the story, you feel like it's really true for a moment in the middle of the movie, and then some little prankster turns on all the lights in the cinema and it just snaps you out of it. You say, who in the world just did that right at the climactic showdown between the villain and the hero? And that's the same thing that people who are part of this collective ritual feel when you, Michael, or anybody else Michael Anthony, don't participate in the ritual of getting the product they're all supposed to get, right?
Yeah, and I revel in that because I see the interruption of the propaganda as one of any liberty loving person's duty. Is that it's our job, if we're, if we're up to it, of course we're free to do or not do whatever we want, but I think that to help preserve and uphold liberty for humanity, we all need to step up in our own lives and resist however we can. So
But what do we do about the rest of society, Michael Anthony? Because most people are not like you, where, I mean, they're not going to do a carnivore diet. They're not going to do, deep philosophical principles. How do you get other folks who are not going to be so committed to going against the grain to go along in a peaceful direction in society?
I think just leading by example. So, you know, uh, encouraging people, trying to inspire people just mostly by openly living a life that is dedicated to liberty and to to love and to uh, I feel like fear is the number one thing right now. Everyone's afraid of this or that, divided over this and that. I think that by living as yourself, you can set an example, and without even trying, you just just stick to your principles, live them as faithfully as you can and as openly as you can, and others will see that. And just like I mean, humans are very monkey see, monkey do. We're whether we like it or not, we have this mimetic impulse that causes us to behave in certain ways depending on who's around us, and that's natural. We can't beat ourselves up about it, but we have to use, I think, those same mechanisms in our makeup to encourage each other to do things that are healthy, just because the big they, again, they all know how this stuff works more than we do usually. They employ uh, really simple psychological methods to, and just it's marketing. It's all marketing. So if you want to see the conspiracy for what it is, you don't really have to look that far beyond marketing and the fact that there are very uh, tried and true principles to manipulate people, to train people, that you can use to train a rat in a lab. It's where we are literally lab rats in many more ways than we realize because of how easily programmed we are. So I think just by living our most genuine lives, we can help inspire each other to be our best.
Where do you think it's heading? Where are they trying to move us towards? If we're rats in a cage, in their perspective, where are they trying to steer us into?
I believe it is a globalist technocracy that is being built around us, and
What do you mean by technocracy?
the use of technology to uh, to control us. It's being packaged as convenient, or it is often convenient. Like we're using technology right now that can easily be used to control us or propagandize us to do the opposite. But like any tool, it can be used for good or bad. And uh, so I see but as far as, like, say, the technocracy begins, or I think it's expanding mostly through this idea of tracking everything. Uh, the this whole idea of the Internet of Things, of um, biometrics, wearables, and eventually implantable technology. That there are New York City. New York City is covered in cameras, and that can be helpful. Or, I mean, I was able to find a missing friend once because of these cameras on the streets in New York City. But at the same time, that's being used to trace all of us for whatever purposes, and are often dishonest, even, I would say, criminal governments, whatever they want to do. So it's
Well, the good news is for the future, it looks like they're steering us towards a more carnivore based world. The bad news is it's going to be cockroaches and maggots they'll be eating. So
you will eat the bugs.
you going to
Oh
eat
man,
those? Are you going to adapt to roaches in your carnivore routine?
no sir, no sir. I
What if it's
actually
just,
did.
what if they start off with just put the roach, it's going to be ground up as powder like your organ meats and you just got to sprinkle it on your ribeye. Will you start there?
They're already doing that. I mean, they've been selling
Oh, you're in
cricket
New York
clouds.
City. Yeah, they're probably got roaches and everything over there in the food.
Well, I mean,
Sorry.
naturally. Don't forget the rats.
You know, the rats have diabetes in New York City. Did you hear about that?
Oh man, I did not know that.
Yep, the rats have diabetes over there. There's an epidemic of it because they're licking all that nasty, rancid vegetable oils in the alleys, you know?
Yeah,
Probably how
it's
they got diabetes.
yeah. People want to look at the rats and in the street and say ew, and it's we created that. We made created a situation, or rather, the people who built these cities created the circumstances in which these horrible things can happen. And there's so many layers to
Yeah, but you
what's
look at New York City in 1970s, it was very lean people. You know, people weren't eating vegetable oils and, they didn't have the problems.
yeah, that's for sure. Think there were a lot of other issues. I mean, there are always a lot of other issues going on, but certainly, yeah, that's in fact now that you mentioned the 70s, that's when the World Economic Forum was begun. I know I'm saying it's not all about them, but they are so instrumental, and they bring together many different forces that have been working on this global technocracy. So the the 70s were really the great transitional period for all this stuff. And I was born in the 80s, the mid 80s, when I think the ball had really gotten rolling. So they got it started in the 70s, but in the 80s, you get everything from, like, say, the vaccine schedule for children, which gave a lot of power to the pharmaceutical industry. Uh, I mean, controlling us from birth. And
Mm-hmm.
then you had I haven't really thought it through very thoroughly, but in the 70s is when a lot of this began, and in the 80s is when a lot of the implementation of what was uh, begun in the 70s really started to show itself. And I feel like the 90s were, I don't know. I don't even know how to characterize the 90s, but by now you have all those things that were starting to really ramp up in the 80s are so crystal clear now. Things that I would have never questioned. But even my mom questioned these things back then.
She was
So
always an independent thinker, huh?
yeah, so I'm grateful to her. May she rest in peace, for resisting vaccinating me as a baby. And that's right when they were starting all this stuff. And yeah, I don't know. The 70s really, I think, are a turning point. But so are the 60s when you think of the cultural end of things. I am amazed by how cleverly it's insidious, but they are clever in how, capital T, that they are step by step conditioning us to think in certain ways and then take another little step forward. Um, and it's step by step. I can't even really. Anyone who really does enough digging will see how it's these actions and all the programming, everything overlaps in a very, I think, carefully designed way that has led us from generation to generation into this, because it couldn't just happen overnight. You see that there, I feel like a lot of these governments and corporations are starting to rush things a bit because they have like Agenda 2030, these different times that they want to, these goals that they want to reach by certain times. And I feel like they are finally running out of time to do that according to deadline. So uh, a lot of that clever and subtle step-by-step work is now being rushed in a way that's waking more people up to uh, the whole plan,
Now,
conspiracy, if you will.
the, if you got a call from Klaus Schwab and he said, "You're a good orator, we want you to speak at our next Davos meeting to just give us another perspective. We understand you don't agree with some of the things that we push in our meetings." What would you say to them?
I'd be terrified. I don't want to be on their radar too much at all. But uh, wow, that would be crazy. I don't know what I would seriously consider it, but I would also seriously consider not doing it because these I just that just blows my mind to even think about. I don't really know what to say except it's they I don't trust these people at all. I don't
I
trust
guess
what
what
they
I'm
would.
saying is if they could be persuaded, what would you start with to try to get them to understand where they're going wrong? Do you have any thoughts about that as a
I
mental
think
exercise?
I think that these Malthusian dictatorial types don't really. I don't know how much hope there is for. I usually don't give up on anybody. I'm ready to say that, but when you look at people like Bill Gates, whose father was instrumental in beginning Planned Parenthood and seeing the connections to uh, uh, these compulsory eugenics that certain people would have actually practiced in the past.
Mhm.
The United States was the home of eugenics for a long time, and that included things like forced sterilization. which I'm very much against. So uh, I feel like it's so, there's always a chance for someone to change their mind as long as they're alive. But I really feel it's such a fundamental divide that when, if you want to talk about reptilians or lizard people, I think these are people who are quite literally lizard people, you know, in the sense that they are operating at the level of the cerebellum in this fight or flight, very uh, yeah, they can only think in terms of scarcity and, you know, just, you know, a weird sort of survival, very self in a I think most so-called selfishness is beneficial to humanity in some ways, but not their selfishness. And the idea of trying to cut back the population for
Yeah,
the
I mean,
good of
that's
the,
what their group was originally called, the Bill and Melinda Gates Institute for Population Control. I mean, that's what they started off in their brand.
yeah, I forget about that. That's yeah,
Never,
so
here's a word of advice: never get medical advice from a Malthusian. They never,
exactly.
they don't really care which way that turns out for you. They come in with a hatchet wound. Yeah, a band-aid will do. They'll just take care of it.
And
uh,
it's tough to really come to terms with that for a lot of people. To, I guess I grew up already kind of having an almost, I'm right, I'd say a pretty cynical view. I've been trying to overcome my cynicism in order to just have I think a healthier, happier energy. But it's I always kind of knew that people can do really bad things. Well, even if they have what they would consider good intentions. That's one thing I wanted to say, is that even these Malthusians, however misdirected they might be, they could be doing what they think is right for everyone, including uh yeah, the people that they will sacrifice for that.
that's why you have to, in my opinion, have to have a transcendent standard of moral behavior that goes outside of just mere humans. Because if we're just going to appeal to another human, we're still, you can always find another human who contradicts that human. You know, for utilitarian, pragmatic purposes, we should depopulate the earth, and then the other one says no, we shouldn't, and they say, by what standard should we care? Right? If that's the
Yeah.
problem, that's why I do believe there needs to be a transcendent that I find in Christianity, or you know, which is this idea of, like, you know, doesn't matter what you think, it's wrong no matter what time period in history you're on, to give people misinformation as a passive aggressive way of contributing to depopulation. You know, like that's not cool. It doesn't. We don't have to appeal to philosophy, because you can always find another philosophy that contradicts it. We can say no, actually, this is outside of humanity, and this is a standard that goes against your actions, no matter who you bring out as a contrary voice. You know.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think goes to this uh, the current, well, really it's an ongoing issue, but especially these days with manipulating language. And as much as I love language, it this our ability to think symbolically has uh, undermined our more, I think, primal, uh, and in a good way, animalistic uh, instincts. The yeah, I'm trying not to get lost in so many. There's so many directions we can go with this, but in the end, yes, I believe that we do need more transcendent values in order to. Uh, but in my sense, it's the transcendence. It's acknowledging the power and perfection of the universe as it is. That even with these flaws, even with these struggles, the universe to me is still in its way perfect. There is an equilibrium that I could never understand to the balance of the universe. And sometimes it helps me, sometimes it hurts me, but I think that it it all works out. I think that the universe is always working toward that equilibrium, and that's what we see around us, but that's also what we are part of. So our thoughts, our feelings, I think everything we do, everything we are, no matter who we are, is part of what you could, I wouldn't call it a plan, but I would call it a dynamic that is inherent to a universe that is as perfect as it can be.
What's the
But
perfect way you like your ribeyes cooked?
I'd say medium rare with a nice sear on the crust.
With butter, or do you just fry it right in there?
Yeah, I like butter a lot, so I might treat myself to some butter, some especially raw butter, raw grass-fed butter.
Well, Michael Anthony, I really appreciate your time, and I thank you for a wide-ranging discussion, provocative thoughts on a lot of things. And I think what you're doing in nutrition is important to broaden people's horizons and understandings about what could be going on in their body that is not serving them well because of certain things that they've done nutritionally that they can remove out of their life. And I think
Thank
what
you.
you're modeling in your work in Liberty is also just as important. You know, you can't, if you don't have your health, you don't have any opportunity to fight for liberty. And if
Yeah.
you don't fight for liberty, you may have a difficult time maintaining your health, right? Because that's so important to have access to quality, real foods.
Well, don't
Uh,
forget, I mean, the right now all this stuff of and with the climate lockdowns, I think are the next big thing to look out for. But also, I would say climate related mandates. This whole idea that meat is bad for the environment and that we all have to stop eating meat or eat less meat. The way that farmers in Europe and I think California, maybe Canada, just all over the world, India, farmers are being pushed away from meat, and so are the so-called consumers. But yeah, it's all about freedom, the freedom to choose what you want to do with your body, whether it's your diet, whether it's your, I mean, I think across the board, but emphasis on your body, no one else's body. So, but uh, yeah, but before we go, I just wanted to mention, you mentioned being in a movie theater earlier. How this analogy that you're in a movie, you're lost in the movie, and some prankster turns the lights on and throws off your whole. Uh, you get snapped out of that hypnosis. But it reminded me of the fact that well, I was arrested at a movie theater during the mandates in New York City for not having a vaccination pass. I was one of like 10 people arrested. Three of us were just found guilty by the New York City summons court for not for trespassing, they call it, because we were let in, and as far as we knew, we were just being allowed in with movie tickets that one of our friends had bought for us, and so we were going to see Scream, the new Scream movie, and in Times Square, Manhattan, and we showed our tickets, went inside, and we ended up being uh, it was we couldn't even understand what was happening, but in the end,
Someone
like
grabbed you in the darkness, just like in the movie Scream.
well, they turned the movie didn't even begin when 50 cops or so eh, just filled the theater and arrested a bunch of us, and outside there were even more cops. It was such a crazy night. uh but
When
yeah,
was this? When did this happen?
this happened in February, but it was just
Um,
yesterday that we were found guilty. We've been through so many different trials. So yeah, it happened in February.
what was your sentence?
Trespassing.
No, but what did they like?
Oh,
What's their punishment?
oh, fines. They want to give us fines. And
I thought they
but
might tell you you can't eat meat for 60 days.
we, we it could get that way if the law
That's your
gets
social
wacky
credit
enough.
score. Once that gets plugged in, you'll be able, you
Yeah, we
won't be
didn't
able.
even absolutely we didn't even get to the social credit score. That's all connected. And uh, more and more
So you were
transparently so.
handcuffed and let out of the theater.
Well, handcuffed and walked out of the theater by a police officer.
And what were you thinking when that happened?
I just can't believe that this is where we are in the 21st century.
How did people look at you? People watching you.
People are shocked. I mean,
Were
I
they
tell
looking
people,
at you in sympathetic eyes, or did they look at you like, who is this perpetrator? What did you do?
I mean, in all the mishigas of the lights and the noise and the crowd, I didn't really have I was kind of, I'm usually just focused on, I'm in the moment. I'm very zen about a lot of this stuff, but uh, it's surreal and it's also disappointing. I mean, that there's so many things that we can talk about regarding this, but I just can't believe that we're still dealing with this. And this is where I see things going if we're not careful. Being arrested for not taking an injection, for not in participating in a medical procedure that goes against my values as someone who believes in nature. This is, and I have friends who, because of their belief in Christianity or whatever it is they believe in, they cannot abide these things, and yet they're being forced on everyone. And I think people had to see that, and this is only one of I think 5 arrests that I had to deal with. I was arrested at Burger King for not having a vaccination pass. Same at
All this year?
uh, some of it was, I guess, was it all this year? Some of it might have been last year, but over the past year or so, just, I mean, until the mandates ended, it was just
So the
unbelievable.
mandates in New York City are all gone now?
No, no, there is still a private worker mandate. Luckily, most places won't bother you about a vax pass anymore, or even a mask. But the I mean, for one thing, I'm concerned that the mayor of New York City might try to bring him back. uh I'm sorry, I do my little impression of that guy because he's such a goofball. But the either they're going to try to bring him back, or pivot to climate change and try to do mandates there. uh I I see this as a direction that we're going in. Just like George Orwell said, he saw that, even though 1984 was a parody, that he saw that this is the direction in which civilization is going, and that it's up to us to not let it happen. So don't let it happen.
Do you feel like there's a vibe shift taking place in New York City that people are turning against this tyrannical stuff, or no, not nearly what it needs to be?
It's mixed because I feel like ever since the monkeypox, whatever we want to call it, started, people started to mask up again more often, even though that's not even recommended for monkeypox. So I do worry that there are still a lot of, how to try not to call them sheeple, out there that are going to drag us deeper, or try to drag us deeper into this tyranny to make themselves feel better. But I do see a lot more people just saying enough already. I mean, the uptake for the boosters is really down, so these boosters are not going to work. I don't think they can keep trying to jab us over and over, but people are taking fewer and fewer of them, and that gives me hope. And people are not as divided over this stuff anymore. I tell people, the other day, when I went to court yesterday, I had to ask someone at a drugstore for whether they sold masks, because I didn't have one for the courtroom, because they won't let you in at all. And they're really crazy about it. So but I told the lady at the store about I had to tell her, because it was against my principles to even ask about a mask. So I told her, like, I hate these things. I was arrested over I told her the story just very quickly, just to vent, and also to spread the word. And she was very interested. And mind you, she had a mask on her face. I can talk with almost anybody in New York now, and it seems like people are just opening their minds and less divided over this stuff. So I have hope. I have a lot of hope. We have to do so many different things, because I feel that we're being attacked on from all different angles, from, again, food, philosophy, psychology, religion, so many different angles, that we need all different personality types, different types of activism, people just living their lives as much as they can, as naturally as they can. And that's how we can help to promote liberty, is just by embracing many different ways of fighting back peacefully. And I have a lot of hope for the future as long as enough of us do that.
Well said. And check out michaelanthony.video for all of his different platforms. YouTube and everything is there. michaelanthony.video. Thank you for your time, sir.
Thank you, sir.